All right, my friend, what are we doing today?
Today, I am finishing up my last class for my communications degree, and
Mm.
my capstone project is an executive speech. It's a persuasive speech that I'm writing. The scenario is I have to find somebody important to give it to the Texas legislature to put into law that there is mandatory mental health check, a database, before someone can purchase a firearm. So I went back, I did quite a bit of research, and I figured talking to you as a mental health professional and getting your take on that and kind of the duality of protecting the public vice patient confidentiality would be an interesting discussion for us to have.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I've always appreciated about you is you sure pick easy topics to discuss. So, I mean, we've talked about DEI and men's health and now gun safety laws. Boy, I am glad you thought of me on this one. Um, okay. I know there's a case you were referring to. Give me some specifics on the background of that. What are we looking at here?
So there's a Tarasoff versus the Regents of University of California in 1976 was a court case in which a young woman was murdered, and the perpetrator, the murderer, was in counseling and actually told the counselor that they were going to do this, and the counselor never reported.
No.
And so it became this case, and that was the building blocks of mandatory reporting.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
So that was
so
in the 70s, huh?
1976.
Okay. You would think I would know that since that's the origin of mandatory reporting, but
It was the case that set the blocks. The article, which was I'm not much for reading psychological studies and whatnot. Hence why I failed Psych 101 three times at Ball State.
for
But
some reason I don't know why. It's just kind of what I've done and
yeah,
why I've been
it seems to be
kind of
your niche.
actually there's this book I was reading that I shared with some friends. Many people have heard of it. It's called Drunk, How We Skipped and Danced and Sipped Our Way Through Civilization. I'm like, I really got into it, read it in a week. And the people I recommended it to were like, you're a nerd. I'm like, wait, what? I thought it was so good. I'm like, maybe I need to go back into it and take a look. So, um, okay, so let's again. You and I were going to have a casual conversation. I decided to hit the record button just in case I want to share this with my audience. So something I feel like we need to share is the idea of mandatory reporting. What is that? In my line of work, what that means is, and I don't know if you need to incorporate this into your paper, but in the psychotherapy world, and I think also in the education world, right? Like if somebody comes to me and says, I'm going to commit suicide, there is a very firmly regimented list of questions I have to go through and either have them admitted or I can't let them leave my office or I have to have the police come and admit them to a secure facility or a hospital. Same thing for if they are saying, I'm going to go I'm getting out of this session and I'm going to go kill somebody. That's mandatory reporting. I have to report that to the authorities, try to prevent them from leaving my office. And, I'm not equipped to restrain somebody in my little old office in Farmville, Indiana, but, I do have connections to local authorities that would do that. And that's mandatory. If I don't do that, if I think there is probable cause, um, I'm at risk I'm liable for what that person does. And then the third instance where I have to break confidentiality is child abuse. If I believe there's any kind of child abuse going on, I have to report that to um, the appropriate authorities. Now, in the way I do this, different therapists do it differently. Somebody says these things, maybe they do it and see, well, I'm going to go report you in secret, or I'll let people know. I tell my clients right from day one, look, here's the rules. If you talk about these things, I have to report it. I'm going to break your confidentiality, but I won't do it behind your back. I'll let you know, hey, we're going to go talk to somebody about this because I'm not equipped to deal with you threatening to kill somebody. So that's the way I deal with mandatory reporting. What in the world? Why is this part of your paper? What are you doing?
So here's some uh, these two gentlemen by the names of Adam Langford and Jason Silva did this paper, this incredible uh, study, and it was published in the International Review of Psychiatry in 2021. And it was titled "The Timing of Opportunities to Prevent Mass Shootings: A Study of Mental Health Contacts, Work and School Problems, and Firearms Acquisition." Without going into too much detail, the study was great. But some interesting aspects of that was 86% of perpetrators of mass shootings since, I think they did 2014 to 2019 or 2021, 86% of them had mental health contact.
Mm-hmm.
And what was it? 50% of them had seen a mental health professional within 1 month of the shooting.
What was the statistic there?
I think 50%. 50%.
50%. I would be interested with that 86%, what it means by contact. I mean, there's so many possibilities there, but I mean, 50% having a mental health session within a month of their committing that crime. That's an interesting stat. Not surprising. I guess if I'm surprised, I would have thought it would have been more.
Yeah, it's just, and then when you go to the CDC website, and not that I trust everything the CDC puts out, but it says 1 in 5 adults live with mental illness, 1 in 25 adults live with a serious mental illness, and so how I'm looking at it is in the state of what we're going through, which is basic domestic terrorism. Right, we're dealing with domestic terrorism almost every day. I think one of the things I read in the state of Texas, children at the age of 10 are learning about pressure points in school in case there's a shooting. Right, so they're learning first aid in school. We're not learning to take guns away. We're just learning how to deal. We're all dealing with the aftermath, and nobody wants to talk about the preventative. Right, we just want to say it's the Second Amendment. Everybody has a right to a gun, but we don't want to talk about the preventative measures of, if you've been involved with a domestic violence, you can't purchase a firearm. Right, you can't own a firearm. If you've had a felony, you are not allowed to purchase or own a firearm. But if you went to a mental health professional and you've talked about, I'm having feelings of violence. I've been through this. I have so much anger. You have all these trigger signs, and I think they said there was 4 major trigger signs that someone who's going to conduct a mass shooting displayed, and they were openly public displays of these triggers. Why isn't the mental health professional community coming together and saying, we could do more? We can see the potential. I mean, there's enough studies to say that these individuals have commonalities. What responsibility do you think the mental health community takes to say we've known these people, we've dealt with some of these perpetrators, we could do more? That's a rough question, I know.
Yeah, I mean, my immediate answer is none. As a community, right? Because the mental health world is quite a fractured community, I would think, in a variety of ways. First of all, I think of myself practicing as an individual, right? Like, I am seeing clients back to back, 7 to 8 hours a day on busy days, right? Like, I don't have time as a private practitioner. I don't have time to go lobby the state house. Now, on the other hand, my peers in community mental health centers, right? The way I earn my living for my family is I get paid for every hour I see a client, and the hours I'm not seeing a client, I'm not getting paid unless somebody's sponsoring my podcast, which isn't happening yet. It hasn't reached that many people. My peers, and that goes the same for my peers in private practice, right? Private practice is a dollars for hours situation. We earn money for the work that we do. In a community mental health center, which continue to pop up, which receive copious amounts of public money and federal money, My peers there see clients, see some clients throughout the day. They have productivity quotients they're supposed to maintain. But, if they go to a meeting, right, like a gun safety meeting, to a drug-free community meeting, things like that, they're still on the clock, they're earning money. So there's just a difference there. When I go do those things, I'm volunteering, right? And I do, trust me, I do plenty of volunteer work, pro bono work where I don't expect to be paid. But when it comes to this situation, when you say we as an industry could do more, I guess my question is, like, what is it? I mean, there's so many industries that need to do more. Was it the person's work environment? Is it their family? I would say the individual practitioners that maybe saw these people, maybe they could have done more, but I wouldn't want to study the case notes from that last session or the series of sessions. What was disclosed here? Was this person truly severely mentally ill? Were they dealing with psychotic symptoms where they were out of touch with reality and couldn't tell the difference between reality and fantasy and the voices inside their head? Or were they just disgruntled, frustrated with their toxic work environment and couldn't make their relationship work and just generally angry, right? There's such a difference there. So when we talk about the variabilities of human behavior, like, I wish my industry could be like, all right, there's more you can do, go do it. Like, all right, great. What can we I see that smirk on your face, so I'm hoping you have ideas, man. I see the wisdom in your college t-shirt, so apparently you've
Oh
got some
yes.
answers there. Hit me.
Well, so how I started down the journey of what could be done, because that's a great question, right? What can we do? I looked up essentially what police do as a there's a national check, right? There's the NAC, right, which is a national check to see if there was any domestic violence, if there's any felonies, any of that. And it's simple. There's a warrant out. It's a yes or a no. And upon that yes or no, more investigation can be done. I don't think it's improbable to have a national database that is simply a flag. That is it, right? I believe this person potentially could be dangerous. Doesn't have to say why. Doesn't have to say, it's not an immediate arrest. It's not an immediate this. It's this person has a potency for violence. It could be. Mm-hmm. And then that check, that simple flag, much like the felony or the domestic violence, child abuse, any of the other abuses that prevent you from owning a firearm, because those people are potentially violent and deadly. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
Okay, so let me preface this by saying I like the idea. I truly do think it's an interesting idea, but let me just tear it apart. Because
believe me, I tore it apart in my own mind, because I think
I bet because the difference is a felony is a yes no, and it's been through the legal system, and it's come to a point where that person was prosecuted and they committed a crime so egregious that they are labeled a felon, right? It's a process that is black and white, and to arrive at that ending. Same thing with child abuse. It's a process that reports are either substantiated or unsubstantiated, and somebody is either labeled, they're charged with the crime or they're not charged with the crime. Black and white through the legal system. There it is. What was the third example that you used? Some other black and white one. Felon, domestic violence. Again, goes through the legal system, prosecuted, yes or no, right? So those are by far more black and white, that either it's a yes or no, you're a felon or not. Whereas what you're asking is for me to make a judgment call sitting in my office and be like, and personally, for me personally, I feel very confident in doing that, but I've been doing this for 25 years, right? To sit with somebody across from me and be like, yeah, you know what? I think you might have the intent to be potentially violent. And, like, we need to talk about that. And I'm going to go ahead and turn to my laptop and enter you into a system so you can't go buy a firearm. On the other hand, some of my peers may not be as confident or as competent. No offense, guys and gals, but some second year pre-licensed intern is being asked to make that. And trust me, we don't give interns intentionally potentially violent clients. However, it may come up, and then you're going to ask somebody fresh out of grad school to make that judgment call and have a conversation. Maybe have that conversation, be like, hey, I need to put you on a watch list, or to have the confidence in themselves to do that. My concern is either you're going to have some serious over reporting or some fearful under reporting.
So you bring up a good point. I'm going to counter that. And you said it perfectly. Here I am sitting across from another person having to make a judgment call with just defined a judge in a court of law. It's no different, right? The law is fallible, right? There's people that go to jail that unjustly, there's people that are let off that shouldn't. It is fallible. And it's not a perfect system, but it is the beginning of one. Am I towing the line?
No, bro, you're walking into my trap. Keep talking. Anybody watching the video, you just saw me demonstrate him walking in. I hear you. Look, I'm going to jump right in on that. All right. I'm going to jump right.
Please.
Yes, it's no different, except for the fact that a judge has had years of education in the legal system, and therapists
had 20 years.
What's that?
You said you had 20 years?
I've been a psychotherapist for 25 years, right?
Probably longer than some judges.
Absolutely. My education is how to help people become better humans. You and I have talked about this, not to assess, not on the regular. And again, in my realm of private practice, I choose who comes into my office, who I want to work with, and who I refer to other people. I am choosing to work with people that are resilient and need help building more resilience. I'm choosing to work with people that are looking for meaning in life. That's my area of expertise. Somebody is chronically schizophrenic and out of touch with reality. That's not in my realm of expertise. That's not even in my ability to treat. They need a system of care where they're in an office a couple times a week, not just once a week, not just right. I don't want somebody out of touch with reality. I encourage all of my clients, if something comes up, you email or text me. That's why I have these devices. I don't want somebody chronically out of touch with reality texting or email me. That's going to destroy my life, because that's how those people operate. So there is a difference there in a judge making that decision versus me. And they also have the right to check that person's a lot more of their past history. And a judge goes into this knowing it's an adversarial relationship. I am here to judge you. I walk into every session, every hour, thinking I am going to help you. It's a big difference.
I don't disagree. It's a big difference. It's just, I look at it like this, right? You and I are having a conversation. I want to better myself, right? I really do. But I talk about how horrible my work environment is.
Your what is? Your
my
diet?
Work environment.
Oh, your work environment.
Yes, that too could use some vast improvement, but you're not a professional in that.
Yes, we do talk about your work environment quite often.
So I'm just about my work environment. I'm talking to you and I say, man, I just get so angry. Sometimes I could just, and I stop. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Nothing big, nothing that says I'm going to do something, but you're like, that's interesting. Okay. So for safety, right? Because you're not doing anything to anybody. Let's just flag Joe. Let's flag him.
Oh,
right?
I can't flag you on that, man. I can't flag you.
Why?
I'm so angry. I could just ... That's just bad judgment. First of all, it's bad therapy, right? But I know plenty of. Hold on, let me finish, because I know plenty of professionals. Man. I know plenty of professionals that would be like, oh hell no, I'm not. So what are you going to do this weekend, right? I mean, they would totally avoid that question. I'm going in neck deep, and I'm like, whoa, you get so angry, you could do what? Let's follow that all the way through. What do you mean? And that person goes, man, I could go in there and shoot that place up. Okay. Yep. Hey, we got to talk about, well, do you have firearms? Well, I've got 5 or 10 at home. But Okay, what am I supposed to do then? But if they say, no, I think I'm going to go buy one today. Okay, yeah, I could. That's a situation where I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea. It's my responsibility to, let this list know that you shouldn't be buying a firearm today. What else can you do to cope with that? Okay, I feel good about that. What if that guy's already got, or gal, no sexism here, already has a half dozen to a dozen firearms at home? Am I supposed to what?
Well, that's when the mandatory reporting would come in, but
Fair enough.
right. But
Fair enough.
we're and I don't think of it like a life sentence, right? You flag somebody and it's a time. They go in to buy a firearm and they're like, hey, you've been flagged
Mhm.
for some reason, doesn't tell them why. But we need to get this cleared up before you can purchase a firearm.
Mhm.
We're going to need you to talk to somebody. And then they go have a conversation with somebody. Maybe somebody's like, yeah, it was 10 years ago. What are you buying the firearm? I'm going to go hunting. I'm going to this, I'm going to that, and go through the due process, just like anything else.
That's an
But
easy one. What if it was 10 hours ago?
phew, and it's flagged.
Yeah. What if that
And
person was sitting in my office at 8 a.m.? I flagged them and they tried to go buy a firearm at 6 p.m.
well, they can't, they wouldn't be
Yeah,
able to.
right.
So, I mean, prevention and then the amount of time it would take them before they could buy a firearm, hopefully intervention could happen. Um, you know, I don't have all the answers. I just got a
Yeah.
great idea.
No, I think that's the beauty of this conversation, right? I'll be honest, every time one of these things come up, many therapists tend, especially social workers, tend to be like, that's it. We need to get rid of all of them. I'm like, well, extreme measures are never the answer. But whenever that idea comes up, well, we should have trained mental health practitioners that can run an assessment to judge whether somebody wants or should be able to buy a firearm. Man, I am backing away from that like an explosion. I don't want to touch that. I don't want to be the person responsible for making those judgments.
We're, we, Kayla and I talk about this, my youngest. We talk about these all the time because he's all
Mhm.
about adult conversations. And, you know, I don't know why we're in the state that we're in. I mean, you could analyze
Because you chose
all
to move to
kinds of
Texas,
angles.
right? Because you chose you.
Texas is not the most violent, just so you know, we're actually like number 5. So because we didn't move to New Mexico, we avoided number 1.
Okay,
So,
gotcha.
but
No,
we
when you
talk,
say state that we're in, what do you mean by that?
like the state of this country and
Mhm.
why, these violent acts are occurring in such a almost in a constant. I mean, I think there was 600 mass shootings, which is considered 4 or more people being injured in a single incident. I think there's been 600 so far this year as of October around the country. We don't hear of 99% of them because they either don't, they aren't big enough to hit national news or wasn't in a public enough area, or for whatever reason we don't hear. I was astonished when I heard there was 600. But and I don't know why we're in this, but he brought up, not to bring up politics, but he's like, someone at school said this is the most divided the country's ever been, because we always want to do extremisms. This is the most divided. I'm like, actually, the Civil War is probably the most divided the country's ever been, and we're
We
not
were at
even
war,
close to
yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Wait, you don't
I
think so? We'll talk
not
about that
quite
another
there.
time.
And it's just, and somebody said, well, this is the most dangerous it has been in our country. And I'm like, did you ever, the Wild West? Have you ever, there's been many a times within our history when it was more dangerous to walk the streets than it
That's
currently
totally
is.
where I go to, man. If you watch anything historic on any time in history, like, first of all, this is not the most violent. This is the most reported, right? Because
Correct.
everything, this is the most informed we are. That's why people live it. This is one of the safest times in human history, right? Go watch. Everybody on the podcast knows I've been finishing up this show called Lost Kingdom or Last Kingdom, right? 900 AD, Vikings and barbarians and the formation of English, the formation of England. Dude, people are walking around with swords and daggers, and if you look at them wrong, they cut your head off, right? There was no
Yeah.
regard for human life whatsoever. As you pointed out, the wild, wild west, right? Somebody spilled your whiskey and you would get your six shooter out and fill them full of lead. Like, we all know these stories, and I mean, some of them fantasy, probably, but most of them are pretty true. There was such a low regard for human life. And now, it just in general, now we, because it's more politicized and more shown through media, like, we think we're in more violent times, but I mean, it's still horrific, don't get me wrong. But I think throughout human history, we've just been pretty damn terrible to each other.
I don't disagree, and I think we're in a state. We're in such a state of instant gratification
Mm-hmm.
that it's the same for violence too,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. If I'm
It's
instantly angry, I need to go take it out on somebody.
exactly,
Yeah.
and it's in Texas we have the constitutional carry, which was
Mm-hmm.
just the greatest idea ever,
What's that mean?
where
Break
you
that
don't
down.
need a license, you don't need any background checks, you don't need anything to carry a firearm
To
publicly.
ca- to carry now, surely the background there, it's federal background checks to purchase a handgun, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So you
Okay.
still go through the purchasing, but
Yeah.
carrying in the street
Yeah. It's the
is
same thing in Indiana
completely
now. Just a couple years ago, they changed that you don't need a license. You can open carry, so you can just have it on your hip, walking around with your 511 tactical pants and your untucked, right? And it's been weird. I haven't seen that much different about it, but um, I think the absence. First of all, if you're going to own a firearm, you should have to go through some training and certification to know just what the heck you're doing. It's too easy to walk into a store and be like, that one's pretty. I want that one, and have no clue what you're doing. One of our mutual friends in the state of Ohio had to go through extensive training, and I love that. I'm like, really? It's like, yeah, a couple weeks worth and proficiency training and all this. I said, that's amazing. In my state, in your state, it's voluntary, right? You can either have, Uncle Bob teach you how to do it or have nobody teach you how to do it. And I think that, I mean, we've got to go through what, I don't know, a couple hours of training and like 50 hours of monitored, supervised driving to get a license. But anybody can just go get a firearm? That's insane.
and it's the statistics right now in Texas is firearm violence has risen 14%
Mm-hmm.
since 2001, since we went to the constitutional carry, right? And it's a lot of double homicides, which essentially this person pulls out their gun and the other person's like, well, I own one too. And then they end up,
In what kinds of
Darwinism.
situations, though?
There was one on the highway in
Oh my.
Houston during rush hour. There was one a couple weeks ago where a guy flipped another guy off and he pulled out a gun in the middle of the highway and went blaze of glory. So
So I think that speaks more to our mental health crisis, and as you and I were talking about earlier, our men's health crisis, right? I mean, that's insane, right? That's just so completely unhealthy. Human beings not knowing how to control their anger and rage while driving, and the end result, they use a tool to end somebody else's life. Well, that started way before that tool, right? That started within
absolutely.
I don't know, childhood trauma, inability to deal with emotions. It's interesting, most of these situations you brought up were men, right? Because we're taught, not taught to deal with our emotions, and the only emotion we get to express is anger. We got a serious problem, a serious mental health problem, and a serious mental health problem.
Yeah, I live in the epicenter of masculinity. And, you know, for instance, I was at my son's football game and there was a running back and he's a good kid, really hard on himself. And I couldn't understand. And then I actually figured out who his father was. And his son had gotten hurt during the game. And he was on the sideline. He had messed up his ankles a couple weeks now in a row and he just couldn't do it. He tried and couldn't. And he was on the bench, and the coaches told him to stay there, stay off the ankle. And his dad had told him to get up and go shake hands after the game.
Mm-hmm.
And the kid looked at him and he's like, the trainer and everybody told me to stay here. He's like, you're so soft. And I was like, wow, like, so your son's ankle in his future means nothing except for this persona that he is hard. That's the only thing that matters to you.
Yeah. That's sad. That poor kid, man.
Yeah, and what he's going to grow up to envision masculinity and what he thinks being a man is, and what he thinks he needs to do, and how he needs to act. And yeah, and Kale notices it, because that is not the way this house is, ran, and that is not the way we deal with things. And he talks quite a bit about what these other kids act like, and I'm like, it's not them. You understand, it is generation. It is right. They were taught this. They didn't manifest this idea themselves. So
yeah,
it's rough.
Well, I know in my area, as I've said before many times, it's an honor for me, and I'm very proud of the men who decide they need help and willingly come into my office. No, even the ones that unwillingly, because their partner or spouse told them they have to go, right? And I take that really seriously, but I am starting to recognize, and this is something you and I should work on someday, is more of us need more of that positive masculinity. That stuff you and I have talked about for 25 years while either you were deployed or I was going through school, or we've talked, I think we're fortunate, right? We've got a good group of dudes that can hold each other accountable and be like, hey, you're screwing up, or that's not right. And I don't think enough men have that. They're either isolated, or they're working too much, or they had an upbringing of too much John Wayne and not enough sensitivity and emotion, right? We do have emotion. I'm not saying we have to be sensitive to everything, but for goodness sake, if we don't express emotions, they bottle up until we explode. I've seen it too many times.
Yeah, it's everywhere. It's not, and that's, you talk about it, and the more that society is pushing the sensitivity, the woke, the this and that, it seems like the more masculine certain areas are getting. Like they're trying to go this opposite. And I think there's a balance. Like you said, you don't have to be upset about everything, but you got to be able to talk about what you're going through.
Yeah. Yeah, communication is key. Healthy communication is key. Come on, I've been preaching that for 25 years in different settings. When we can communicate our ideas and our attitudes and our emotions, our beliefs in a way that is received and reciprocated, everything is better. But I was just talking to another therapist, God bless her, yesterday. Some of my clients are other therapists, and we call that supervision, right? Trying to help them be better humans, but also better therapists. And she just wants to spread rainbows and sunshine, and really struggles when and like little sparkles of happiness is what she says. And it's lovely to have these conversations with her, but then really struggles in recognizing, like, there's evil in the world, there's darkness, we're broken. And that's just a reality that we can't, rainbow and unicorn everybody. And it's kind of sad, but it is true. We can do our best to try to improve those that are receptive to it, but and I think this is something I said to her. I said, you're going to appeal to more people when you invite them versus when you mandate them, right? So that idea of when you mandate people to be sensitive, to subscribe to a certain set of beliefs, you're going to get a backlash. The pendulum's going to go the other way. They'll be like, no, I don't want to. But if you can teach them why it's helpful, why it's important, why, a sense of community and connection and understanding is better than this adversity, well, then you're going to attract more people to it. I think that's why I don't even know what the definition of woke is. I do see the word a lot, right? But I think that's why there's so much backlash against it, is because it's a demand to subscribe to a certain set of beliefs instead of an invitation.
Well, and it's because this deals into the whole DEI realm. So getting into the stuff I deal with is, to me, okay, so you're saying I was asleep. So now I'm woke. So now I understand. I still have to choose.
Wait, wouldn't the proper way would it say is I was asleep, now I'm awake? Why was it like?
Yeah. Well, I didn't come up with the term,
Okay. I,
you
I
know.
am one for a little bit of grammar every once in a while, but that's my fault.
But it's the idea that you, and I talk about this when I do some of my trainings. I can give it to you and you may not respond right then.
Mhm.
That's not what I'm hoping eventually. If I
Mhm.
teach you about this and you're not ready to handle it, once I've given you the information, you can't deny that you have it. It takes time for you to process it.
Yeah.
I can't demand somebody right away. Okay, well, I taught you this, so now I implement it.
But I'll tell you what. I mean, just that idea of the definition or the description of woke. I was asleep and now I've been awakened to these new ideas. It's pretty insulting, right? Well, if you don't subscribe to these ideas, well, then you're asleep and you're of lower ability, intelligence, whatever. It's I don't know. It's not very inviting. It's
It's
insulting.
not.
Okay, hold on a second, bro, because I thought we gotta we I know this could go on for hours, but we have to get your assignment done. Wasn't there an
It's
assignment here?
I'm good. I have enough to
Oh, okay.
say that Dr. Dan Franz does not concur.
Wait, what? Hold on. You were so like the media. You just took, I mean, literally been
No,
talking for
no.
45 minutes. You boil that down to one line?
Yeah, well, it's a speech. You know, if you're not for me, you're against me. This is literally Death Star speak right now.
Only the
Um,
Sith deal in absolutes.
no, I've got some good stuff. What we talked about, and it is, even as I was going, I'll tell you that as I'm writing this, because I had to pick something, and I thought it was pertinent. But as I was even writing it, and as I was coming up with my thesis and talking about it, my first thought was military veterans. That was my
Mhm.
first thought,
Mhm.
which happens to be the least violent of all the groups that are currently pulling firearms and shooting each other.
But quite
But my
possibly
first,
some of the most mentally diagnosed, we'll say.
correct, um, but also understanding what they've been through and the
Hmm.
responsibility of the firearm.
Yeah.
And my first thought was this: taking away the ability to buy firearms from a whole bunch of veterans because of what they've been through and PTSD and whatnot, and not being for that whatsoever. So it is
I mean, that's the next civil war right there. You tell, a couple tens of thousands of veterans once you come back, you can't possess a firearm. Oh.
yeah. So don't think that I haven't thought about both sides of the coin on this one. But no, you bring up some really good points about not everybody has the training and the experience and the
Hmm.
confidence to mark that flag and
Hmm.
on a report for another human. So
But now I'm
um,
going to argue that with you. I'm going to argue my argument. We could be trained, right? Because we had to be trained in suicidality and homicidality and child abuse. I mean, we could be trained. I guess the difference is when it comes, I think those three things are so obvious, and any mental health professional is like, oh yeah, I've got to take care of that. I've got to be an advocate for that. I've got to help people with that. I think the idea of gun laws and gun control and gun ownership is so divisive. There are, many therapists, counselors, and social workers would be like, no, I don't want any part of that. I don't want to do it. And it's like, well, but I face this with substance abuse and addictions, right? I carry a very specific license. I've engaged in a lot of training. The difference is like that comes into everybody's office, man. You may have somebody come in there talking about, being depressed and anxious or having relationship issues. And before you know it, you find out they're drinking, an 18 pack of beer every night. You're like, oh, this is an addictions issue. I don't want to deal with it. It's like, no, no, you've got to, because it's so prolific. Um, I can see the possibility of this gun situation being pretty prolific, and people have to be trained to assess it, but we're not there yet.
no, we're not. But I think it's a way forward, or it's something to think about. And maybe it's just the extreme cases, whatnot, but there has to be something. There has to be a preventative measure. If you're saying um, there's 4 to 5 traits that someone displays publicly, which not that I want to go down the rabbit hole, but social media, we can figure out when somebody says something bad about somebody, but we can't figure out when somebody says they're going to take a firearm into a school. Um,
Yeah.
there's no
Yeah.
red flags on social media when somebody posts that. Um,
That's an
but
interesting
that's
point.
a different speech.
Well, yeah, you would think the almighty algorithm would pick that up and flag it if it flags it. That's a really great point, Joe. Tell me, okay, you said there's 4 or 5. Do you have a list of these 4 or 5 characteristics that people display?
Okay, let me go into the paper. Man, it's a
Man,
good read
while
when you
you're
get a
looking,
chance.
I am that's a great point that, we flag so many things on social media, or there's so many sensors, like you would think that would be one that would get caught. I think I heard another statistic recently, um that a large percentage of people that have engaged in this behavior, engaged in this mass shooting behavior, a significant 70-80% plus, significant proportion have been on antidepressants or serotonin, have had their biochemistry augmented. And the research were, most of my people know my frustration with modern medicine trying to treat mental health issues. We're using them way too much, and we don't always know the long-term effects of basically what people say when they're taking an SSRI is it brings the lows higher, but it also brings the highs lower and just flattens them out. And there's some research that needs to be done there, what the contributing factors are. All right, so sorry, man. The 4 or 5 characteristics
No,
people publicly display.
well, that was another research paper that they referenced, but this is what they said. Silver et al. Found that active shooters displayed 4 to 5 concerning behaviors in their lifetime that were observable to others. Now, I don't want to say you're really smart, but you actually listed, with the most frequent being mental health problems, problematic interpersonal relationships, and leakage of violent intent. Similarly, they found that 87% of the deadliest public mass shooters revealed it to at least one other person that they were having violent thoughts, and 80% revealed that they were interested in mass killing.
Hmm.
So,
80% said they were interested in mass killing. I mean,
correct.
there's a flag right there, right? I mean, that's
And we talk about algorithms, right? You can write an algorithm in Facebook to
Mhm.
only show me conservative content because you think that's what I'll click on to keep me on Facebook longer. But you can't write an algorithm that says, I'm going to go kill someone, because literally mass shooters have continuously posted that on social media that they're thinking about doing this, that they have plans to do this. And you can't flag that to get somebody help or to save lives.
yeah, that's a really good point, man. Really good point.
I
Maybe.
guess there's no money in that.
Well, and it's funny. It's not funny. It's ironic. You said, well, Facebook, you can write an algorithm to show you more conservative content. And I think Facebook would explode if they went that route. Now they would go the other direction and show you more left-leaning
No,
stuff.
it's written in there.
Is it
It's
really?
written in. It is. So if you click
Yeah.
on conservative links or you click on liberal links, it'll continue to show you like content.
Well, right,
It's
right.
written
It
into
it
there.
feeds you like content. Like, I've had
Correct.
to talk to quite a few men. I'm like, hey, if you don't quit clicking on the pictures of young women dancing, you're going to continue to get fed more young women dancing, and that's going to cause a problem
Yeah.
in your relationship. Stop it, right? I know you're very prolific in the feline world and all those crazy cat websites you frequent, and that's the animals playing and things like that. I'm like, bro, you gotta quit clicking on the cat websites. And I'm just kidding, but that
You
is,
mean that the internet's more than just funny cat videos? I'm shocked.
if that was all it was good for, I mean, wouldn't it be lovely? Again, going back to that client, it would just be spreading rainbows and unicorns. That would be lovely. Actually, one of the books I read recently in the past couple of years, it was Hari's Stolen Focus, talks about because the social media systems are set up to demand our attention. I mean, literally to augment our brain. They become so addictive. TikTok is one I'm battling a lot lately. It's just so
Mm-hmm.
addictive. It takes people's time. What would it be like if we could engineer these social media systems to actually teach us to be better humans, to feed us positive psychology, improvements in math and banking, and how to understand your credit score and stuff like that? Like, how awesome would it be if we could choose to learn things on it rather than feed ourselves full of cat videos and inappropriate content?
Well, keyword there, choose. People are
Yeah.
choosing to do this, and because it's easy,
Are they?
right?
Are they choosing, or is it engineered to to
Well, no,
wrap
I
up.
mean it is, but you still, I mean, I've pulled way away from Facebook. You know, I'll drop, you know, sunshine and Skittles once in a while, much like your therapist friend,
Mhm.
because that's what I do. I want to drop something because Facebook is my diary to my grandkids. So I'll drop something with meaning. But you know, every time I do, then I, you know, lose an hour of my life because I'm going through everybody else's feeds. And you know, as much as I want to learn about my friends and those people that, I got a phone too.
Yeah.
You know, I put my phone number on there. I don't want to have to check your Facebook to know how you're doing, right? If we're like that, if we're that tight, you know, throw me a text, throw me a, you know, a phone call. But it'll steal hours from me, and I just can't do it anymore. There's
Well,
so
and I
much
think
more I'd rather
that's,
do.
yeah, I think that's the beauty of a lot of friendships you and I maintain, and our friendship is, hey, let's talk, let's have coffee Friday morning, let's, you know, get together and actually visit with each other and have these conversations rather than, you know, we know Facebook and social media is only the best that people, well, maybe not. Most people just want to share the best and look at how amazing my life is, but then there's the other people who are like,
Yeah,
oh, life is so terrible. Look at how bad it
yeah,
is. My spouse, my partner, my kids, and it's like, ooh, don't nobody wants to be that guy.
yeah.
So
Don't throw that out there.
yeah.
No.
I know like in just an hour we've fixed many of the world's problems, including gun violence.
Yeah.
But I don't know, how's it? First of all, congratulations, capstone project wrapping up. For those people, I am total, bro. I'm totally gonna publish this because I think just on the fact that people need to see what college you went to. The T-shirt
Yeah.
says college,
That,
so that's
yeah.
awesome.
That
And
sums it up.
for those of you that don't know, that is a reference to one of the greatest movies of all time.
Animal House.
There you go, classic.
You might want to put in there that I will literally graduate on my 30th year of going to college. It has been 30 years since I started. There
You
was a
know,
short 25-year stint in Navy, but still, it is.
I got to point out to all those, you know, I work with a lot of young men struggling that, you know, well, I'm just farther behind my peers. You know, I'm not where I thought I would be in life. That's right, you guys. You heard my good friend, retired Chief Petty Officer Joseph Otto Paul say it only took him 30 years to
Yeah,
get through college. I'm
yeah.
honored to know you and proud of you for getting there, man. 30 years. So you're never too far behind to pursue those things you want to accomplish in life.
1997 or 1994. 1994 is when I started college, and I will officially graduate 2000.
There are people listening to this going, my God, that dude is positively ancient. How does he have any hair on his head? That's amazing.
I could look, you know, like the person on the other end of the camera, so I'm blessed.
There you are. All right, brother. I'm going to hit the stop record button, but we'll carry on this conversation afterwards. But for all you listeners out there, that is the end of the published conversation.
Thank you.
Hey, man, my pleasure. Thanks for thinking of me.